The first step in SPIRO assays is preprocessing, that will convert raw data acquired by SPIRO into the format required for further steps in the assays. If your data is acquired not by SPIRO, please follow the workaround instructions in our manual. First of all, please make sure that you have everything that you will need for preprocessing. You need to download and install Fiji and two plugins, Multi-Stack-Reg and TurboReg. And you will also need to download the GitHub repository with the macros. For installation, please follow the instruction provided in our manual. Before you start preprocessing, you need to consider several important factors. First of all, preprocessing allows you to correct for drift. You can actually check if you need to correct for drift by loading data from your experiment into Fiji, by dragging and dropping one of the plate folders and loading it as virtual stack. And then you can press on play to see what is the drift from one image to another, and you can see that there is a little bit of wobble, which can be corrected during preprocessing. But if your experiment layout required you to move the plates during the experiment, it's not advisable to use drift correction. The drift correction would use the first image in the experiment as a reference, and if your plate has been moved significantly during image acquisition, drift correction might not be able to follow. Secondly, to ensure that you're running at optimal capacity, please allocate about 75% of the RAM available on your computer to be accessible for Fiji. And for this, you need to open Fiji and go to Edit, Options, and where the hell was it? Memory and Threads. And here you can type in how many gigabytes or how many megabytes of your RAM Fiji will be allowed to use. And click OK, and then you will be informed that you need to restart Fiji for the limit to take effect. Thirdly, please make sure that your computer doesn't go to sleep mode during macro run. Otherwise, macro will be paused. So you need to tweak the power settings on your computer before you start the macro. To allow preprocessing on computers with little RAM available, we added the function of preprocessing in batches, and you can fine-tune how many images are preprocessed simultaneously. You can do it by changing one line in the macro, which is very easy. So you need to go to Fiji, Plugins, Macros, Edit, and then locate the folder that you downloaded from GitHub. And in the preprocessing subfolder, there will be a SPIRO preprocessing IGM macro file that you need to open. And then you need to find the line that says segmentize equals something. This number is the number of images that will be pre-processed as a single batch. And to my experience, 350 images can be easily pre-processed if ImageJ is allowed to use about 7 GB of RAM. If your computer doesn't have that much RAM, you can lower it down to whatever number that suits you best. And then you can save the changes here and run the macro. To run pre-processing, you need to open Fiji and then open the macro. Go to Plugins, Macros, Run, locate the folder that you downloaded from GitHub, and in the preprocessing subfolder there will be SPIRO preprocessing IGM macro file that you need to open. And the very first thing the macro will ask you to do is to open your experiment folder. Please make sure that your experiment folder has the format that we describe in the manual. And I have it here. So here's the experiment folder with the 4 subfolders for each of the plates that contain all imaging data for corresponding plates. Open. The second thing the macro will ask you to do is whether you would like to carry out drift correction or not, and if possible, it's advisable to go with yes at this step. Macro will inform you how many images were taken during this experiment for each plate. Also inform you that for each plate, images will be processed not all simultaneously, but rather in batches of, in this case, 350 images at a time to reduce RAM requirement. Next, the macro will ask you to help it to set the scale, which will then be used for all images in your experiment. You can see that the scale bar is engraved on SPIRO, and you can use magnification tool to zoom in on the part of the photo where the scale bar is, and then go to the line tool to actually draw the line. And you can see here in the instructions, you're advised to press and hold the Shift key while drawing the line to make sure that the line is not angled. If it is angled, the macro will warn you about it and will ask you to redraw it before clicking on OK again. And please hold the shift while redrawing it. And then you will be informed how many pixels correspond to 1 centimeter on your photo. In the next step, macro is cropping off everything which is outside of the selected area, and if needed, you can adjust this area as well. In the log window, you can see the progress. So currently it's processing the first plate in my experiment, and it processes the first batch for this plate. The scale is set and the cropping is underway, and then it will go to the registration, also known as drift correction, and then it will continue to processing the second batch of photos for the same plate. So at this stage, you don't need to do anything manually anymore. The macro is running automatic, and I have 4 plates with about 500 images each, and it will take about 3 hours to process it. The results of preprocessing will be saved in the experiment folder in the subfolder results, preprocessing in individual subfolders of corresponding plates. And here you can find time-lapse tag files for each plate containing all your time points. In this file you can see what plate these files belong to, the date at which image was taken, and also time, and the note whether it was day or night time. And you can see that the image is cropped according to the area selected during the preprocessing and also corrected for drift. If you wish, you can easily export this file as a video by going to File, Save As, and selecting the AVI format. The results of preprocessing will be saved in your experiment folder in the subfolder Results and Preprocessing. Here you will have time-lapse TIFF file for each of the plate that you preprocessed, and you can check the quality of it by dragging and dropping the file into Fiji. You can scroll through your time-lapse using the scroll bar or using the play button. And you can see that all the photos were drift corrected and cropped according to the area selected during preprocessing. On the top of each frame, you will see the number of the time frame or slice, the total number of time frames, the plate name, the date and time of acquisition, and also the note whether it was day or night conditions. If needed, you can easily export this file as a video by going to File, Save As, and selecting AVI format. Importantly, further steps of assays rely on use of the preprocessed files and do not require the raw data. So if you're running low on disk space, you can keep only the results folder in your experiment folder.